You have exactly 30 days to prove you're not the pathetic waste of oxygen I'm ashamed to call my son, or I'm donating every penny to charity and you'll spend the rest of your miserable life begging for scraps like the worthless parasite you've always been." The words sliced through Nathaniel Sterling like a blade dipped in acid, each syllable designed to destroy what remained of his already fragile ego. His father, Victor Sterling, stood behind the imposing oak desk, like an executioner savoring the moment before the final blow, his steel-gray eyes reflecting decades of accumulated disgust and disappointment. 30 days to what exactly, Dad?" Nathaniel's voice came out as a strangled whisper, his throat constricting with humiliation. "To prove I'm not the failure you've spent 28 years telling me I am." Victor's laugh was cruel and sharp, like glass breaking. "You're going to learn what actual work means, you spoiled little boy. Starting Monday morning, you'll work at Sterling Industries' most humble division, our cleaning services company. No driver, no credit cards, no trust fund, no family name to hide behind. You'll live on minimum wage like the insignificant nobody you really are underneath all that designer clothing." The Italian leather chair creaked as Nathaniel shifted, his $5,000 Armani suit suddenly feeling like a costume from a play he'd never auditioned for. "And if I refuse this humiliation, then you can discover what genuine poverty feels like, instead of just pretending to have problems." Victor's smile was predatory as he pressed his desk phone. "Mrs. Chen, send in Miss Rodriguez immediately." The office door opened with surgical precision, and Nathaniel's world shifted completely off its axis. The woman who entered carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of respect she commanded. Her simple navy dress somehow managed to look more elegant than anything he'd seen at charity galas, and her dark hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail that couldn't quite tame a few rebellious curls. "Isabella Rodriguez," Victor announced with obvious relish. "Meet your new supervisor. She's been running our cleaning division for 3 years and has transformed it into our most profitable subsidiary. Isabella, this is my son Nathaniel. Though for the next month, he's just another minimum wage employee under your complete authority." Isabella's handshake was firm enough to make his rings dig into his fingers, her brown eyes assessing him with the practiced gaze of someone who'd dealt with entitled clients and found them wanting. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice carrying just enough of an accent to make his name sound almost musical, despite the clear disdain in her tone. "Working under you?" The words escaped before he could stop them, loaded with more incredulity than he intended. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly, and something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Not anger, but something colder and infinitely more cutting. "Is that going to be a problem?" she asked, her voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze champagne. "Because I should mention that your father has given me complete authority over your rehabilitation. That includes your schedule, your assignments, your performance reviews, and your employment status. I can fire you whenever I feel like it." Victor's grin widened like a shark sensing blood. "Oh, and Nathaniel? Isabella doesn't know about the ultimatum or the inheritance. As far as she's concerned, you're just another spoiled rich brat who needs to learn some responsibility. Try not to embarrass the family name more than you already have, though I suppose that's impossible at this point." Isabella pulled out a tablet and began typing with efficient, precise movements. "We start at 5:30 a.m. sharp. Uniform will be provided, though I doubt we have anything in your size since our employees actually work for a living. You'll be on probation for the first week, which means any attitude, any complaints, any sign that you think you're better than the job, and you're gone." She looked up from her tablet, her gaze traveling from his perfectly styled hair to his handmade Italian shoes, and Nathaniel felt more exposed than if he'd been standing naked in Times Square. "I've dealt with rich kids before, Mr. Sterling. They usually last about 3 days before running back to daddy. The record is actually 2 hours and 17 minutes, held by a senator's son who cried when he saw his first toilet brush." "I'm not going to cry," Nathaniel said, though his voice sounded less convincing than he'd hoped. "We'll see." Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Your first assignment is cleaning the executive washrooms on the 15th floor. All 23 of them, by hand, with a toothbrush. And since you're probably wondering, yes, some of them will be absolutely disgusting, because apparently rich people think their money makes their bodily functions smell better. The color drained from Nathaniel's face. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. And Mr. Sterling? Isabella stepped closer, close enough that he could smell something that wasn't expensive perfume. Vanilla and cinnamon, warm and real, and completely different from the chemical cloud of designer fragrances he was used to. I don't give special treatment to anyone. Your father's money doesn't mean anything to me. Your last name doesn't impress me. And your little tantrum right now? It just proved everything I suspected about you. She turned to Victor, her demeanor shifting to pure professionalism. Mr. Sterling, I'll have your son's schedule and performance metrics on your desk every Friday. Standard probationary period applies. If he can't meet basic expectations, he's terminated. Perfect, Victor said, settling back into his chair like a king who'd just watched a particularly satisfying execution. Nathaniel, I suggest you get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, you start learning what it means to earn something for the first time in your pathetic life. Isabella headed toward the door, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. Oh, and Mr. Sterling, I'd recommend getting your hands dirty before tomorrow. Literally. Because if you show up with a fresh manicure, I'm assigning you to the septic system maintenance crew. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel falling. Nathaniel stood in the oppressive silence of his father's office, his mind reeling between panic, humiliation, and something else. Something that felt suspiciously like attraction to the woman who just systematically destroyed his ego in under 10 minutes. 30 days, Victor repeated, his voice dripping with satisfaction. And son, that girl has more integrity in her little finger than you've shown in your entire worthless existence. Don't you dare think you can charm your way through this like you've charmed your way through everything else? Nathaniel walked out of the office in a daze, his phone buzzing with notifications from friends wanting to know about weekend plans, party invitations, yacht club events. The messages felt like communications from another planet, a world where his biggest decision was whether to order Dom Perignon or Cristal. He looked down at his Rolex, a graduation gift worth more than most people's annual salaries, and wondered if Isabella Rodriguez had any idea she was about to completely demolish everything he thought he knew about himself. The elevator descended past floors of Sterling Industries employees, each one representing a world he'd never bothered to understand. But as the numbers ticked down, Nathaniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine terror mixed with an inexplicable excitement about what tomorrow would bring. Even if it started at 5:30 in the morning. Even if it involved cleaning toilets with a toothbrush. Even if it meant facing the most intimidating woman he'd ever met. A woman who clearly thought he was less useful than the gum on her shoe. The elevator reached the ground floor, and Nathaniel stepped out into a world where his name meant nothing. His money was worthless, and his survival depended entirely on impressing a woman who'd already decided he was hopeless. 30 days had never felt so terrifyingly long, or so dangerously short. If you're going to vomit, do it in the utility closet, not on my freshly mopped floors. Isabella's voice cut through the executive washroom like a blade, and Nathaniel looked up from where he was crouched beside the marble toilet, his face green as old money. The toothbrush in his hand trembled slightly, and his $5,000 suit jacket lay crumpled on the floor, already stained with cleaning chemicals and his own sweat. "I'm not going to vomit," he managed to say, though his voice suggested otherwise. He'd been at this for 3 hours, and his manicured hands were already raw from the industrial-strength cleaner Isabella had insisted he use. Famous last words of every privileged boy who's ever worked for me. Isabella leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, watching him with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a particularly fascinating specimen. "Though I have to admit, you've lasted longer than I expected." The ambassador's son made it exactly 47 minutes before he started crying. Nathaniel forced himself to scrub harder, trying to ignore the way his back screamed from the unfamiliar position. "I'm not crying." "No, but you're definitely reconsidering your life choices. Isabella stepped into the washroom, her practical work shoes clicking against the marble floor. Let me guess. You're wondering how someone with your education, your connections, your obvious superiority ended up on your hands and knees scrubbing toilets like a common servant. The words hit their mark, and Nathaniel's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. Isabella's voice was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made her words more devastating. You're 28 years old, you've never worked a day in your life, and you think money makes you better than everyone else. You've probably never even cleaned your own apartment. You pay someone to do that for you. She wasn't wrong, and they both knew it. Nathaniel's penthouse had a cleaning service that came 3 times a week, and he'd never given it a second thought. You're also wondering why I'm not impressed by your last name, Isabella continued, pulling out her tablet to check something. Here's the thing, Mr. Sterling. I've been working since I was 14. I've cleaned toilets that would make this marble palace look like a 5-star restaurant. I've scrubbed floors until my knees bled and my hands cracked. And I did it all without complaining because I knew it was temporary. She crouched down beside him, close enough that he could smell that intoxicating scent of vanilla and cinnamon again. But for you, this isn't temporary, is it? This is your last chance to prove you're not completely worthless. Nathaniel stopped scrubbing and looked at her, really looked at her. Up close, he could see the small scar on her chin, the calluses on her hands, the way her eyes held a kind of strength he'd never encountered in his privileged circles. How do you know this is my last chance? Because your father didn't just randomly decide to humble you. Victor Sterling doesn't waste time on lost causes unless the stakes are impossibly high. Isabella's smile was sharp and knowing. Plus, you've got the look of a man who's just realized his safety net has been yanked away. She stood up, brushing off her knees. Break time's over. You've got 19 more washrooms to go, and then you're helping Maria with the office floors. She's 73 years old, and she's been working twice as hard as you for the past 40 years. Wait, Nathaniel called out as she started to leave. Why are you doing this? Why are you so determined to break me? Isabella paused, her hand on the doorframe. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Not cruelty, but something almost like sympathy. Because, Mr. Sterling, I've seen what happens to people who never learn to work for anything. They become empty shells of human beings who think their worth comes from their bank account instead of their character. She looked back at him, and for a split second, Nathaniel saw something in her eyes that wasn't contempt. It was disappointment, as if she'd hoped he might prove her wrong. And maybe, she added quietly, because I've met your father. If this is your last chance to become someone worth knowing, you're going to need every bit of help you can get. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Nathaniel alone with his thoughts and the overwhelming scent of industrial cleaner. He looked down at his hands, soft, pale, useless hands that had never done anything more challenging than sign checks and shake hands at charity events. For the first time in his life, he felt genuinely ashamed. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of marble and porcelain, each bathroom revealing new depths of humiliation. His back ached, his knees were bruised, and his designer shirt was ruined beyond repair. But something strange was happening. With each toilet he cleaned, each floor he scrubbed, he felt a tiny spark of something that might have been accomplishment. By the time Isabella returned to check on his progress, the sun was beginning to set through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She found him in the last washroom, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at his raw, reddened hands. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Like I've been hit by a truck," he admitted. "But also," he paused, searching for the right words, "like I actually did something today, something real." Isabella's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's the difference between earning something and being given something. The first one actually means something. She pulled out her tablet and made a note. "Your performance today was adequate. You didn't quit, you didn't complain after the first hour, And you didn't try to bribe anyone to do the work for you? That puts you ahead of 90% of the rich kids I've dealt with." "Gee, thanks for the glowing review," Nathaniel said, but there was no real sarcasm in his voice, just exhaustion and something that might have been gratitude. "Don't get cocky. Tomorrow we start at 5 a.m. and you're working with the night crew. They're not as patient as I am." Isabella headed toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Mr. Sterling? You might want to invest in some actual work clothes. That suit cost more than most of our employees make in 6 months, and it's not going to survive another day like today." As she left, Nathaniel struggled to his feet, his body protesting every movement. He caught sight of himself in the mirror, hair disheveled, face flushed, clothes stained and wrinkled. He looked like a completely different person from the man who'd walked into his father's office that morning. The strange thing was, he wasn't entirely sure he looked worse. His phone buzzed with a text from his usual Friday night crowd. "Drinks at the club? Brad's buying the first round of Dom." Nathaniel stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Instead, he found himself thinking about Isabella's words, about the way she'd looked at him with something that wasn't quite contempt, and about the unexpected satisfaction he'd felt from completing something difficult. 29 days to go. As he walked toward the elevator, Nathaniel caught himself wondering what tomorrow would bring, and realizing that for the first time in his adult life, he was looking forward to finding out, even if it started at 5 in the morning. Even if it meant working alongside people who had every reason to despise him. Even if it meant facing Isabella Rodriguez again, with her sharp tongue and her unimpressed eyes and her inexplicable ability to make him want to be better than he was. The elevator doors closed, and Nathaniel saw his reflection one more time, tired, dirty, and strangely alive in a way he'd never experienced before. Maybe this wasn't going to be the disaster he'd expected after all. "Holy hell, is that really Victor Sterling's boy?" The whispered words cut through the pre-dawn darkness of the Sterling Industries loading dock, and Nathaniel winced as every pair of eyes in the break room turned toward him. At 4:47 a.m., wearing a wrinkled Walmart polo shirt and jeans that actually fit like jeans instead of designer statements, he looked about as far from his former self as possible. "That's him," confirmed Maria Santos, the 73-year-old cleaning veteran Isabella had mentioned. Her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming coffee cup as she studied him with undisguised curiosity. "Though he looks different than his pictures in those fancy magazines." "Different how?" asked Tommy Chen, a night custodian who couldn't have been older than 25. "Like maybe he's actually human," Maria said, and several people chuckled. Nathaniel felt heat rise in his cheeks, but before he could respond, Isabella's voice cut through the chatter like a knife through butter. "If you're all done discussing Mr. Sterling's humanity, we have 47 floors to clean before the day shift arrives." She appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing work clothes that somehow made her look more put together than most people did in evening wear. She handed 1 cup to Nathaniel without ceremony. "Black coffee. You'll need the caffeine." The gesture was so unexpected that Nathaniel almost dropped the cup. "Thank you. Don't read into it. I need you functional, not collapsing from exhaustion." But there was something in her tone that wasn't quite as sharp as usual. The next 6 hours redefined everything Nathaniel thought he knew about hard work. He mopped floors until his arms burned, emptied trash bins that weighed more than his gym equipment, and learned the intricate art of cleaning windows without leaving streaks. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but something strange was happening. He was starting to take pride in doing things right. "Not bad, college boy," said Roberto Vega, a maintenance worker with arms like tree trunks, watching Nathaniel carefully clean around the base of a copier. "You're starting to get the hang of it." "Thanks," Nathaniel panted, surprised by how much the compliment meant to him. "Though you might want to work on your technique with the floor buffer," Roberto added with a grin. "You looked like you were wrestling a bear earlier." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was the kind of good-natured teasing that came from acceptance, and Nathaniel found himself smiling despite his exhaustion. Around noon, Isabella found him in the supply closet, methodically organizing cleaning products by type and frequency of use, something she hadn't asked him to do. "What's this?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "I noticed the supplies were kind of scattered," Nathaniel said, not looking up from his work. "Thought it might save time if everything was in a logical order." Isabella stepped into the small closet, close enough that he could smell that intoxicating vanilla and cinnamon scent. "You reorganized our entire supply system without being asked? Was that wrong?" Nathaniel finally looked at her, and was startled to see something that looked almost like approval in her eyes. "No, it's..." She paused, as if the words were difficult. "It's actually brilliant. This will save the team about 20 minutes every shift." The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Isabella's gaze traveled over his face, taking in the determination in his eyes, the way his jaw was set with concentration rather than entitlement. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would quit by now. Someone who would throw money at the problem or call Daddy to rescue him." Isabella's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Not someone who would reorganize supply closets and learn the names of every person on the cleaning crew." "You know their names," Nathaniel pointed out. "I'm their supervisor. It's my job." "No," Nathaniel said, stepping slightly closer. "You know Maria's granddaughter just started college. You know Tommy's saving up for his wedding. You know Roberto's trying to get his citizenship paperwork finished. That's not about the job, that's about caring." Isabella's breath caught slightly, and for a moment the walls she'd built around herself seemed to waver. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make me think you might actually be worth knowing." The words hung in the air between them like a confession, raw and honest, and completely unguarded. Nathaniel felt something shift in his chest. Not just attraction, though that was definitely there, but something deeper. Respect, admiration, the beginning of something that felt suspiciously like love. "Isabella, Miss Rodriguez," she corrected quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. "Miss Rodriguez," he said softly. "What if I am? Worth knowing, I mean." Before she could answer, her radio crackled to life. "Isabella, we need you on the 32nd floor. Someone's tracking mud through the executive conference room." The spell broke, and Isabella stepped back, her professional mask sliding back into place. "I have to go. You're assigned to windows on floors 15 through 20. Use the squeegee properly this time. I don't want to see any streaks." She started to leave, then paused at the closet door. "And, Mr. Sterling, good work on the supply organization. The team will appreciate it." As her footsteps faded down the hallway, Nathaniel stood in the supply closet surrounded by neatly arranged bottles and brushes, his heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. Something fundamental had shifted between them in the past few minutes. The ice in Isabella's eyes had cracked just enough to let him see the warmth underneath. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of squeegees and glass cleaner, but Nathaniel found himself thinking about the way Isabella had looked at him in that moment of vulnerability, not with contempt or pity, but with something that looked almost like hope. By the time his shift ended, every window from the 15th to 20th floor gleamed like crystal. Roberto appeared beside him as he packed up his cleaning supplies. "You know, college boy, when you first showed up, we all figured you'd be gone by lunchtime. What changed your mind?" "The way you listen when people talk, the way you work without complaining, and the way you look at Isabella." Roberto's grin was knowing. "Like she's the most fascinating woman you've ever met." Is it that obvious? To everyone except maybe her, but she's starting to notice. Roberto clapped him on the shoulder. "Word of advice, though, she doesn't trust easy. Too many people have let her down." As Nathaniel walked toward the elevator, his reflection in the gleaming windows showed a man who looked nothing like the pampered rich boy who'd started this job 3 days ago. His hands were calloused, his clothes were practical, and his eyes held something they'd never had before. Purpose. His phone buzzed with another message from his old crowd, something about a weekend yacht party. Nathaniel deleted it without reading the whole thing, realizing that world felt as foreign to him now as this one had just 72 hours ago. 27 days to go. But as the elevator carried him down toward the parking garage, Nathaniel found himself thinking less about the countdown and more about tomorrow morning, about seeing Isabella again, about earning another moment of approval in her eyes, about the possibility that he might actually be becoming someone worth knowing. Someone who might be worthy of a woman who cared enough about her team to know their dreams and fears. Someone who might deserve a second chance at becoming the man he was supposed to be all along. The elevator doors opened, and Nathaniel stepped out into the evening air, tired but oddly hopeful. For the first time in his life, he was looking forward to coming to work tomorrow. "You've got to be kidding me. Nathaniel Sterling is dating the help?" The venomous voice cut through the Sterling Industries lobby like a poisoned blade, and Isabella felt every drop of blood drain from her face. She'd been heading to the elevator with her morning reports when she spotted them. 3 women in designer suits and predatory smiles, clustered near the reception desk like vultures circling carrion. "I saw them together in the supply closet yesterday," continued the blonde in what Isabella recognized as a $5,000 Chanel suit, practically groping each other like teenagers. Isabella's stomach clenched. Vivian Ashworth, Victor Sterling's business partner's daughter, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend from his trust fund days. Even from across the lobby, she radiated the kind of casual cruelty that came from never having to face consequences. "God, Victor must be having a stroke," laughed another woman. "First his son becomes a janitor, now he's slumming it with the cleaning lady. Well, at least we know why she got promoted so fast." Vivian's voice dripped with malicious glee. "I wonder how many board members she serviced to work her way up to supervisor." The words hit Isabella like physical blows, each one designed to destroy and humiliate. Her hands trembled as she clutched her tablet, years of careful professionalism crumbling under the weight of their casual hatred. "Isabella?" She spun around to find Nathaniel behind her, concern written across his face. He was wearing actual work clothes now, jeans and a polo shirt that had seen better days, and his hands showed the calluses and small cuts of someone who'd been doing real labor. "What's wrong?" His voice was gentle, and he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and honest sweat. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she managed, but her voice came out strained and unconvincing. "No, you're not." Nathaniel's eyes searched her face, and she saw the exact moment when he heard the laughter from the reception area and understood. His expression darkened like a storm cloud gathering strength. "Nathaniel, don't." But he was already walking toward the group of women, his jaw set in a way that promised someone was about to have a very bad morning. Isabella hurried after him, her heart pounding with dread. "Vivian." Nathaniel's voice was ice cold as he approached his ex-girlfriend. "Still spreading poison wherever you go, I see." Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Nathaniel, darling, I was just telling the girls about your new career path and your fascinating choice in companions." She looked Isabella up and down with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. "Though I suppose when you're reduced to manual labor, you take what you can get. Watch your mouth." Nathaniel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Oh, how noble. The fallen prince defending his cleaning lady. Vivian's laugh was brittle and cruel. "Tell me, Nathaniel, does she at least do your laundry for free? Or do you pay her the same rate you pay for her other services?" The implication hit the lobby like a bomb. Isabella felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, aware that every person within earshot was now staring at them. This was her worst nightmare, her professional reputation being destroyed by association with Nathaniel's world. "That's enough." Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice carrying an authority Isabella had never heard before. "You want to attack me? Fine, I deserve it. But Isabella Rodriguez has more integrity in her little finger than you've shown in your entire miserable existence." "Integrity?" Vivian's eyebrows rose mockingly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Yes, integrity. Something you wouldn't recognize if it slapped you in your surgically enhanced face. Nathaniel's voice carried across the lobby, and Isabella saw several Sterling Industries employees had stopped to listen. Isabella has worked harder in one day than you've worked in your entire life. She's earned every promotion, every ounce of respect, every bit of success, through her own merit. He turned to face the small crowd that had gathered, his voice growing stronger. This woman runs the most efficient division in Sterling Industries. She knows every employee by name, works twice the hours of anyone else, and has never asked for anything she didn't earn. And if anyone in this building has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Isabella stood frozen, caught between humiliation and something that felt dangerously like hope. Vivian's smile turned venomous. How touching. Though I wonder what your father thinks about his heir apparent defending the hired help so passionately. I don't give a damn what my father thinks, Nathaniel said quietly. And I don't give a damn what you think either. Well, you should care what I think. Vivian's voice turned silky and threatening. Because I'm having lunch with the Sterling Industries board next week, and I'm sure they'd be fascinated to hear about their cleaning supervisors, extracurricular activities. The threat hit home like a physical blow. Isabella felt her career, her reputation, everything she'd worked for, hanging by a thread. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there while her world crumbled around her. You wouldn't dare, Nathaniel said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Try me. Vivian's smile was triumphant. Unless, of course, you want to come to your senses and remember who you really are. Your trust fund is still there, Nathaniel. Your real life is still waiting. All you have to do is stop playing dress-up with the help. Isabella couldn't take any more. Without a word, she turned and walked toward the elevator, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She heard Nathaniel calling her name, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop, because if she turned around now, she'd completely fall apart. The elevator doors closed just as Nathaniel reached them, and Isabella slumped against the back wall, finally allowing the tears to come. Everything she'd built, everything she'd earned, was about to be destroyed because she'd been foolish enough to think that someone like Nathaniel Sterling could actually care about someone like her. 10 minutes later, there was a soft knock on her office door. Isabella, please let me explain. Go away, she called, her voice hoarse from crying. I'm not leaving until we talk. She opened the door to find Nathaniel standing in the hallway, his face pale and stricken. Isabella, I'm so sorry. I should have handled that differently. You should have stayed away from me entirely, she said, her voice steady despite the tears still threatening. I knew this would happen. I knew associating with you would destroy everything I've worked for. It doesn't have to. Yes, it does. The words exploded out of her. Don't you understand? People like Vivian don't just disappear. They have power, connections, influence. And people like me? We're expendable. Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes desperate. Isabella, please, we can fight this. Together. Together? She laughed bitterly. There is no together, Nathaniel. There's you with your trust fund and your family name and your safety net. And there's me, one scandal away from losing everything. That's not true. It is true. She wiped her eyes angrily. And the worst part? For a moment I actually started to believe that maybe someone like you could actually care about someone like me. The pain in Nathaniel's eyes was genuine, but Isabella couldn't afford to care anymore. Her survival depended on cutting this off now, before it destroyed her completely. I'm requesting a transfer, she said quietly. I think it's best if we don't work together anymore. Isabella, don't do this. Don't let them win. They already have won, she said, and closed the door in his face. As Nathaniel's footsteps faded down the hallway, Isabella sank into her chair and buried her face in her hands. 24 days left on his probation, but it didn't matter anymore. The fairy tale was over before it had really begun. Outside her office window, Storm clouds were gathering over the city, and Isabella couldn't help but think they were perfectly appropriate. Some storms, she knew, didn't just pass. They destroyed everything in their path, and she was right in the middle of this one. "You magnificent, stubborn fool, you actually did it." Victor Sterling's voice carried a mix of amazement and something that might have been pride as he stood in the doorway of his son's tiny studio apartment. Nathaniel looked up from where he sat on his second-hand couch, surrounded by financial reports and employment records, his laptop balanced precariously on a stack of books. "Dad?" Nathaniel's voice was hoarse from exhaustion. He'd been working 18-hour days for the past week, his regular cleaning shifts plus every overtime hour he could find, desperately trying to prove something to someone who wasn't even speaking to him anymore. 23 days, Victor said, stepping into the modest space that couldn't have cost more than a fraction of Nathaniel's former monthly wine budget. 23 days since you walked out of my office, and you're still here, still working. Still. He paused, taking in the sight of his son in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, looking more like a real person than Victor had ever seen him. "Still what?" Nathaniel asked bitterly. "Still humiliating the family name. Still playing dress-up with the help, as Vivian so eloquently put it?" Victor's expression darkened. "Ah yes, Miss Ashworth. I heard about her little performance in the lobby last week." He moved closer, and Nathaniel was surprised to see genuine anger in his father's eyes. "What she did to Isabella was unforgivable. You know about that?" "I know about everything, son. Including the fact that you've been working double shifts to cover Isabella's responsibilities since she requested that transfer." Victor sat down in the apartment's only chair, looking strangely out of place in his expensive suit. "I also know that productivity in her new department has increased by 30% since she arrived, and that every member of your former team has specifically requested her return." Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. "She's brilliant at what she does." "She always was." "Yes, she is, which is why I've been having some very interesting conversations with my board of directors this week." Victor pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. "It seems Miss Ashworth made good on her threat to have lunch with them. She spent considerable time explaining how my son was fraternizing inappropriately with the cleaning staff." "Dad, I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything." Victor's voice was firm. "Because I spent even more time explaining to the board exactly who Isabella Rodriguez is and what she's accomplished. Did you know she has an MBA from Columbia that she earned while working full-time? Did you know she's been sending money to support her younger siblings through college? Did you know she turned down 3 higher-paying corporate positions to stay with Sterling Industries because she believed in the company's potential?" Nathaniel stared at his father in shock. No. She never told me any of that." "Of course she didn't, because unlike most people in our social circle, Isabella doesn't need to broadcast her achievements to feel important." Victor leaned forward. "She's exactly the kind of person I always hoped you'd become. Hardworking, principled, loyal, someone who earns respect instead of demanding it." "Then why did you put me through this hell?" Nathaniel's voice cracked with emotion. "Why make me watch her reputation get destroyed because of me?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Because I needed to know if you were capable of loving something more than your own comfort. And I needed to know if you'd fight for what mattered, even when it cost you everything. I lost her, Dad. She won't even look at me now. Have you tried telling her the truth?" "What truth?" Victor's smile was sad but knowing. "The truth about why you're really here, Nathaniel. The truth about the ultimatum. The truth about what you stand to lose if you don't prove yourself worthy of the Sterling name." Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. "You want me to tell her about the inheritance? About the 30-day deadline? I want you to tell her that you fell in love with her when you thought you had nothing to offer. I want you to tell her that you'd give up every penny to earn her respect." Victor stood up, straightening his tie. "And then I want you to prove it." "How?" "The board is meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the Ashworth situation. Vivian's father wants to merge our companies, and she's been positioning herself as the perfect corporate wife for Sterling Industries' future CEO. Victor's eyes glinted with something dangerous. She's expecting me to announce your engagement. Nathaniel shot to his feet. What? Dad, I'm not going to marry Vivian. I'd rather lose everything than… Good, Victor said quietly. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The two men stared at each other across the small apartment, and for the first time in Nathaniel's life, he saw something in his father's eyes that looked like respect. The board meeting is at 9 a.m., conference room A. I suggest you be there. Victor headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and son, you might want to ask Isabella to attend as well, as my guest. She'll never agree to that. She won't even speak to me. Then you'd better figure out how to convince her, because tomorrow you're going to have to choose between the easy path and the right path, and this time the whole world will be watching. After his father left, Nathaniel sat in the growing darkness of his apartment, staring at his phone. Isabella's contact information glowed on the screen like a lifeline he was afraid to grab. He'd tried calling her dozens of times over the past week. He'd sent flowers to her new office, left messages with her secretary, even shown up at her apartment building only to be turned away by a doorman who clearly had strict instructions. But tomorrow was different. Tomorrow, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd learned about himself, would be put to the ultimate test. Nathaniel took a deep breath and typed out a message. Isabella, I know you don't want to see me, but I need you to trust me one more time. There's something you don't know about why I'm really working at Sterling Industries. Something that changes everything. The board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., conference room A. Please come. Please give me one chance to prove that what we had was real. N. He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. Then he sat back and waited, his heart pounding like a drum. An hour later, his phone buzzed with a response. One chance. Don't waste it. Nathaniel closed his eyes and felt something that had been broken inside him start to heal. Tomorrow, he would risk everything, his inheritance, his future, his family's approval, for the chance to win back the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The woman who had taught him what it meant to be worthy of love. Outside his window, the city sparkled with 1,000,000 lights, each one representing a dream, a hope, a chance for redemption. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Nathaniel Sterling felt ready to fight for his. 23 days of hell, but maybe, just maybe, it would all be worth it. If he could find the courage to tell the truth, if he could find the words to make her believe, if he could prove that love was more powerful than money, more valuable than status, more important than anything he'd ever thought mattered, tomorrow would be the most important day of his life. He just hoped he was finally man enough to deserve it. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time we address the elephant in the room. My son's spectacular fall from grace and what it means for Sterling Industries' future. Victor Sterling's voice cut through the mahogany-paneled conference room like a sword, and every board member turned to stare at Nathaniel, who stood just inside the doorway wearing his best work clothes. Clean jeans and a button-down shirt that cost less than what most people in this room spent on lunch. Vivian Ashworth sat at the far end of the table like a queen holding court, her Hermes dress and predatory smile making it clear she expected this meeting to end with wedding bells and merger documents. Her father, Richard Ashworth, nodded approvingly at Victor's words. "We all know why we're here," Richard said smoothly. Nathaniel's little experiment in manual labor has been amusing, but it's time to restore some dignity to the Sterling name. The merger between our companies would be mutually beneficial, and Vivian has proven herself more than capable of… Has she? Every head in the room turned toward the voice, and Nathaniel's heart stopped. Isabella Rodriguez stood in the doorway, wearing a simple black dress and carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional chignon, and her eyes held a fire that made the expensive jewelry around the table look like costume pieces. "I'm sorry," Vivian's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I don't believe you were invited to this meeting, Miss Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez. I'm here as Mr. Sterling's guest." Isabella's voice was steady as steel as she moved into the room. "And I have some things to say about capability." Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. "Please, Isabella, the floor is yours." Isabella walked to the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over each board member before settling on Vivian. 3 weeks ago, I was told that my professional reputation was being questioned because of my association with Nathaniel Sterling, that my competence was somehow compromised by my background, my position, my worthiness to even exist in the same space as people like you. Her voice grew stronger with each word. "So I thought you might be interested in some facts. In the past 3 weeks, productivity in the cleaning division has increased by 47%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the cost-saving measures implemented during this period will save Sterling Industries over $2 million annually." Murmurs rippled around the table. Richard Ashworth's confident expression began to waver. "Those improvements," Isabella continued, her eyes never leaving Vivian's, "were implemented by Nathaniel Sterling, a man who learned every job from the ground up, who earned the respect of every employee he worked with, and who proved that leadership isn't about titles or bank accounts. It's about character." "This is ridiculous," Vivian snapped. "We're not here to discuss janitor performance reviews." "No," Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like thunder. Every eye turned to him as he stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "We're here to discuss the future of Sterling Industries. And I have something to say about that." He moved to stand beside Isabella, close enough to feel her strength radiating outward. 24 days ago, my father gave me an ultimatum: prove I was worthy of the Sterling name, or lose my inheritance entirely. Gasps echoed around the table. Vivian's face went pale. "I thought he was punishing me," Nathaniel continued, his voice growing stronger. "I thought he was trying to humiliate me, but I was wrong. He was trying to save me, because the man I was 3 weeks ago wasn't worthy of this company, this family name, or—" He turned to look at Isabella, his eyes soft with emotion. "Or the love of an extraordinary woman." "Nathaniel," Isabella whispered, but he pressed on. "Isabella Rodriguez has an MBA from Columbia University, which she earned while working full-time to support her family. She's turned down multiple corporate positions that would have paid double her current salary because she believed in Sterling Industries' potential. She's the most competent, principled, remarkable person I've ever met, and if this board has a problem with that, then you have a problem with me." The room was dead silent. Victor's smile was proud and brilliant. "Furthermore," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying across the room, "I'm formally declining any inheritance, any trust fund, any financial support from my family. I'll earn my place in this company the same way Isabella has, through merit, hard work, and proving my worth every single day." "You can't be serious." Vivian's voice was shrill with panic. "You're giving up billions of dollars for a cleaning lady?" "I'm giving up money I never earned for a chance at a life that actually means something." Nathaniel turned to face Isabella fully, his heart pounding like a drum. "And I'm hoping that life includes the woman I love." Isabella's breath caught, tears swimming in her eyes. "Nathaniel, I love you," he said simply, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I love your strength, your intelligence, your incredible heart. I love the way you care about people, the way you work twice as hard as anyone else, the way you made me want to be better than I ever thought possible." He dropped to one knee right there in the conference room, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. Not a diamond worth more than a house, but something he'd bought with money he'd earned with his own hands. "Isabella Rodriguez, will you marry me? Not because of what I can give you, but because of what we can build together? Will you take a chance on a man who's finally learned what really matters?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Isabella smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in a week, and dropped to her knees in front of him. "You magnificent fool," she whispered, cupping his face in her hands. "Of course I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was soft and sweet and full of promise, and it took place in front of 12 board members and one very angry ex-girlfriend who suddenly realized she'd lost everything she'd been scheming for. When they finally broke apart, Victor was on his feet, applauding slowly. "Well, that settles that. I hereby withdraw my ultimatum and officially offer my son a position in this company, starting at the bottom, earning his way up, just like every other employee." "This is insane!" Vivian shot to her feet. "You can't seriously be choosing her over everything we could offer?" "Miss Ashworth," Victor's voice was ice cold, "the merger is off. Your services are no longer required. Please see yourself out." As Vivian stormed from the room, dragging her stunned father behind her, the rest of the board members began to smile. It was hard not to get caught up in the fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. "I do have one condition," Isabella said, still kneeling in front of Nathaniel, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Anything. No more cleaning toilets with toothbrushes. That was just cruel." Nathaniel's laughter filled the conference room, rich and genuine and full of joy. "Deal, though I'm keeping the calluses. They remind me of how I earned the right to love you." Isabella kissed him again, softer this time, and whispered against his lips, "You earned that right the moment you decided to become the man I always knew you could be." As the board members filed out, still buzzing with excitement about the morning's drama, Victor approached the happy couple. "Welcome to the family, Isabella," he said warmly. "Though I should warn you, he's going to need a lot of work." "Lucky for him," Isabella said, standing and pulling Nathaniel to his feet. "I happen to be very good at renovation projects." 6 months later, Nathaniel and Isabella stood on the roof of Sterling Industries, looking out over the city that had witnessed their unlikely love story. He was now assistant operations manager, working his way up through merit and dedication. She was director of human resources, having been promoted after revolutionizing 3 different departments. "Any regrets?" Isabella asked, her hand intertwined with his, her simple wedding band catching the sunset light. "Only one," Nathaniel said, pulling her closer. "I wish I'd met you sooner." "If you'd met me sooner, you wouldn't have been ready for me." "True. I had to learn how to be worthy of you first." Isabella laughed, the sound carrying across the city like music. "You were always worthy, Nathaniel Sterling. You just had to learn to see it yourself." As the sun set over their city, their company, their future, they stood together. 2 people from different worlds who had found something more valuable than money, more powerful than status, more lasting than anything either had ever dreamed possible. They had found each other. And that, as it turned out, was worth everything.